He poured the coffee slow, watching it burn her blouse, never realizing he was spilling his own career. Morning light filtered through the wide cafe windows, spilling gold across polished floors and steaming mugs. The soft chatter of early risers mixed with the hiss of milk frothing, spoons clinking, and quiet jazz humming from an old speaker near the counter. It was the kind of morning Evelyn Brooks loved, calm, predictable, safe. She sat by the window in her pressed beige coat, a worn paperback resting beside her untouched cup of coffee. The scent of roasted beans wrapped around her like a blanket. This is true African Voices, stories that make you feel, think, and remember that silence is never strength. Subscribe now and tell us where you're watching from, because today's story isn't just about what happened. It's about what it awakened. At 54, Evelyn carried herself with quiet grace. Silver strands laced through her curls, her skin smooth but marked by years of holding her tongue in rooms where her voice didn't fit. She'd spent her life helping others as a social worker, the type who remembered everyone's name but was forgotten by most. But here, for 10 minutes before work, she could breathe. The bell over the cafe door jingled. A tall man in uniform stepped in, the kind that made every room shift. Sergeant Blake Turner. His badge gleamed under the lights, his expression casual but owning space as if he'd built it. People nodded, smiling like they knew him. Evelyn didn't look up. She didn't need to. The air had already changed. He ordered a large caramel latte and leaned on the counter, joking with the barista, a young white woman named Mandy who laughed a little too hard. When Evelyn's name was called, she stood, smiling politely as she reached for her cup. But on the counter sat two identical drinks, hers and his. Mandy looked unsure. I think this one's yours, ma'am, she said. Before Evelyn could take it, Turner's voice cut in, low but sharp. Actually, that's mine. She blinked, soft-spoken. I believe this one was for Evelyn. Turner smirked. You sure about that? Looks like you ordered the wrong size. His tone carried that familiar, quiet insult. Not a shout, but a jab meant to remind her of place. A few customers turned to watch. Evelyn tried to keep her voice even. I didn't. It's what I ordered. He chuckled, shaking his head. I'm sure you can afford the small one, right? The sentence hung in the air, heavy, sharp, cutting through the hum of the cafe. Mandy froze behind the counter. An older man near the door glanced up, then looked away. Evelyn felt the sting crawl up her chest. Not just the insult, but the awareness of being watched, of every eye deciding whether to laugh, to pity, or to pretend they didn't hear. She steadied her breath, refusing to give him what he wanted. You have a good day, officer, she said softly, reaching for the cup. Turner's smirk hardened. He picked up the drink, her drink, and poured it slowly into the trash bin beside the counter. The hiss of the liquid meeting garbage filled the silence. Guess we're even now, he said. The cafe went completely still. Even the espresso machine seemed to stop. Evelyn's hand trembled, the muscles in her jaw tightening as heat spread up her face. She swallowed her anger like it was fire. People watched, no one spoke. A few glanced away, pretending to scroll through their phones. Turner's eyes met hers, satisfied. Next time, he said, just be honest about what you want. Evelyn's voice was steady, though it cracked at the edge. You don't know who I am, officer, but you should have treated me better. He laughed, cruel and careless. Yeah? Who are you, the mayor's maid? The small laugh from a nearby table felt like a slap. Evelyn picked up her purse, every movement deliberate, graceful. She turned, walking toward the door, her heels clicking against the tile, like punctuation marks to her dignity. Outside, the morning light no longer felt gentle. It glared. She reached her car, her hands trembling as she sat behind the wheel. The humiliation pressed against her ribs until she couldn't hold it anymore. Tears came silently, quickly. She covered her mouth, afraid to let the sound escape. Her husband's voice echoed from memory. Calm, deep, steady. Don't let them break your peace, Evie. But peace felt like a distant thing now. It wasn't just the coffee. It was the laughter, the silence, the permission people gave cruelty when it wore a badge. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror, the same woman she'd been that morning, but smaller somehow. She wiped her eyes, straightened her collar, and forced herself to breathe. Her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message. Marcus. Morning, Mom. Heading into the precinct now. Wish me luck. Promotion interview today. Her lips trembled into a faint smile. Her son, her pride, her hope. The one she'd raised to move through this world with grace and power. To be what his father never got the chance to be. She typed back slowly. Good luck, baby. You'll do great. Then she set the phone down on the passenger seat and closed her eyes. She saw Marcus as a boy. Knees scraped, heart pure, eyes too bright for this world. She remembered his first question after seeing a police officer pull her over years ago. Mama, why was he so mad if you didn't do anything wrong? Back then, she'd told him, some people carry hate like a habit, but you don't have to carry it back. Now, that lesson felt like a test. She started the car, her reflection flickering against the windshield. The same woman, yes, but something inside her had shifted. The quiet ones always notice when the line between respect and humiliation gets crossed. As she drove away, she glanced once more in the rearview mirror, whispering under her breath, you don't know who I am. Because someday soon he would. Marcus Brooks adjusted his tie in the reflection of his car window, drawing a long breath before stepping into the precinct. The morning sun was sharp, slicing through the gray concrete lot where patrol cars sat in perfect rows. He had worked for this moment for years. Early mornings, endless case files, sacrifices his mother never complained about. Today could be the turning point, the day he earned the position he'd been chasing since joining the Bureau, lead liaison for the state's Civil Rights Division. Inside, the building smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Officers moved briskly through the hall, badges glinting under fluorescent lights. Marcus walked with purpose, tall, composed, dark suit crisp against his skin. His confidence wasn't arrogance, it was armor. In a space like this, a black man had to wear his worth before anyone tried to strip it away. He greeted a few familiar faces. Some nodded with polite warmth. Others avoided eye contact. The air was different today, thicker, watchful. His interview was set for 10 a.m. in the Internal Affairs conference room. He arrived early, because being early meant control. As he waited, he scrolled through his phone. His mother's message from that morning made him smile. You'll do great. She always said that every test, every milestone. Her faith in him had built him. Then the door opened, and in walked Sergeant Blake Turner, the same man who had poured hot coffee into a trash bin hours earlier, though Marcus didn't know it yet. Turner nodded at him briefly, flipping through a folder as he took his seat at the interview panel's long oak table. Marcus straightened his back, sensing something familiar in the man's presence. That easy arrogance, the unspoken hierarchy that followed him like a scent. Two other officers joined, both captains. Turner leaned back in his chair, scanning Marcus with a smirk that didn't belong in a professional room. Special Agent Brooks, he said, voice dripping with the kind of familiarity that wasn't earned. I've heard good things about you. You must be proud. Not many of your kind make it this far. Marcus paused, expression unreadable. My kind, sir. Turner smiled thinly. You know, the young ones with ambition. The captains shifted uncomfortably. Marcus gave a polite nod, swallowing his irritation. Ambition's part of the job, I believe. The interview began, question after question, about leadership, case handling, ethics. Marcus answered calmly, articulately, every response laced with quiet conviction. But he could feel Turner watching him, not listening, assessing, judging, testing. At one point, Turner interjected with a laugh. So tell me, Agent Brooks, if a civilian accused an officer of misconduct, how would you make sure it's not just another emotional misunderstanding? Marcus met his eyes, the air between them charged. By listening first, and by remembering that respect isn't optional, it's the foundation of law. The room went silent for a moment. One captain cleared his throat, impressed. Turner's smirk faltered just slightly. When the interview ended, Marcus shook their hands firmly and left the room. His heartbeat slowed as the door clicked shut. He'd faced worse than that. He'd learned from his mother how to walk through insults without letting them stain his spirit. He drove home through Atlanta traffic, the city skyline flickering like a heartbeat. He thought about his father, a gentleman arrested years ago for something he hadn't done, a man whose faith in justice never recovered. That memory was what drove Marcus to wear the badge differently. He wanted to be the change that could have saved his father. When he got home, the sun was sliding down. His apartment was modest, orderly, photos of his mother on the shelves, smiling in every one. He called her, as he always did after big moments. She answered on the second ring, her voice soft but a little distant. "Hey, baby." "Hey, Ma." "The interview went well, I think. Tough questions, but I held my ground." "That's my boy," she said, her voice catching slightly. "I'm proud of you, Marcus." He frowned. "You okay? You sound tired." "Just a long day. You know how it is." "Did you eat?" "I will." He smiled gently, though he could hear something in her tone, the heaviness she tried to hide. He'd grown up learning her silences. They spoke louder than her words. "I'll come by tomorrow, all right? I'll bring breakfast." She hesitated, then whispered, "You don't have to, baby. I want to." When the call ended, he sat quietly for a while, scrolling absent-mindedly through his phone. Notifications buzzed, work messages, emails, and then a video link from a coworker. The caption froze his breath. "Cop humiliates black woman in Georgia cafe. Marietta PD." His thumb hesitated, then pressed play. The shaky footage began mid-argument. A woman's soft voice, calm but tense, and a man in uniform towering over her. The camera zoomed in as the officer poured coffee into a trash bin, the crowd murmuring in disbelief. And then the woman looked up, voice trembling but steady. "You don't know who I am, officer, but you should have treated me better." The camera caught her face clearly. Marcus stopped breathing. His mother, Evelyn Brooks. The screen blurred as his vision narrowed, his pulse hammering in his ears. He replayed it once, twice. The words burned into his chest. He knew that cafe. He knew that uniform. Sergeant Blake Turner, the same man who had sat across from him this morning, who had smirked, who had called him your kind. Marcus sat back in his chair, jaw tight, the world tilting slightly around him. He felt anger rise, hot, clean, controlled. But beneath it was something deeper. Disbelief, sorrow, the ache of watching the person he loved most be disrespected by the very system he'd sworn to uphold. He closed his eyes, fists clenched. For years, his mother had told him, justice doesn't always wear a badge. He had fought to believe otherwise. Now, staring at her tearful face on a stranger's screen, he realized she'd been right all along. The video didn't just spread, it detonated. Within hours, Evelyn Brooks' quiet humiliation turned into a national conversation. Her face was everywhere, frozen mid-blink, eyes filled with disbelief as hot coffee streamed into a trash bin. The caption screamed across screens, "Cop humiliates black woman over coffee. Marietta PD." By noon, hashtags were trending. Hashtag justice for Evelyn. Hashtag Marietta Cafe. Hashtag coffee and color. News anchors replayed the clip, voices polished and somber, asking the same questions. Was this about race? Was it an overreaction? Was it just a misunderstanding? But to Evelyn, it wasn't any of those things. It was Tuesday morning. It was a routine stop turned spectacle. And now her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls came from journalists, activists, and strangers offering sympathy wrapped in curiosity. Some wanted interviews. Some wanted tears. She declined them all. She didn't want her pain edited for prime time. Outside her small home, camera vans parked on the curb. Reporters waited near her mailbox, hoping she'd appear with a quote. She kept the blinds shut, sitting on a couch in silence. The TV was off. The world was loud enough without it. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at the same video, playing on endless loop across channels. He hadn't gone into work. He couldn't. The department was already in full damage control mode, and the hypocrisy sickened him. The same system that claimed to protect justice was already defending one of its own. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues. "You see this mess? Your mom's a hero, man. Be careful what you say." He didn't respond. He knew how the machinery worked, how fast it could twist facts until the victim became the problem. He opened his laptop and began pulling up internal files. His access as an FBI agent gave him reach most people didn't have. He searched Sergeant Blake Turner complaints. The screen populated with a long list. Allegations of excessive force, disrespectful conduct, racial bias. Each marked insufficient evidence. Each buried under procedural language. Marcus's jaw tightened. There it was, proof of what his mother had endured for years in silence. The kind of behavior people dismissed until it made headlines. At the same time, Turner was being quietly shielded. His superiors released a statement calling the incident a regrettable misunderstanding. On television, his lawyer spoke confidently about how emotions were high, and Officer Turner is receiving threats due to false narratives. False narratives. The phrase made Marcus feel sick. Evelyn, meanwhile, couldn't leave her house without being recognized. Neighbors brought casserole she didn't ask for, sympathy she didn't need. She wasn't angry for herself. She was angry that humiliation had to be public before it became real to anyone else. She thought about all the women who never got filmed, who never got believed. One evening, as dusk deepened into blue, a rock struck her garage door with a hollow bang. When she stepped outside, her heart dropped. Someone had spray-painted 4 words in red across the metal. Go back to where you belong. Her breath hitched. For a moment, the world blurred. That same feeling of smallness she'd fought off all week came roaring back. Marcus was there within 20 minutes, face tight with fury. I'll find out who did this, he said, scanning the neighborhood, fists clenched. Evelyn touched his arm, her voice soft but steady. No, baby. You'll waste your peace on people who don't have any. He turned toward her, eyes burning. I can't just let them. You can, she interrupted gently. You'll just do it differently. She looked at him, tears glistening under the porch light. Don't fight hate with hate, Marcus. Make it mean something. He nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. In that moment, she looked like a warrior in plain clothes, bruised but unbroken. Later that night, Marcus sat at his desk surrounded by case files, the dim light from his laptop reflecting in his eyes. He started collecting records, complaints, statements, internal memos, every piece of evidence showing how Turner had been protected. He built a wall of truth, brick by digital brick. Days passed. The video still flooded every platform, now dissected by talk shows and pundits. Some defended Turner. Others demanded his badge. But beneath the noise, something else stirred. Whispers from former officers, citizens, even employees in the department. Marcus began receiving anonymous messages. He's done this before. They covered for him last year. Check the traffic stop in June. He followed every lead. Slowly, a picture emerged, a pattern of prejudice, intimidation, and silence. Meanwhile, Evelyn found herself at church that Sunday, sitting quietly in the back pew. People turned, nodding respectfully. After the service, one woman approached and said, "God's using you, Miss Evelyn." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I just wanted my coffee." The woman squeezed her hand. Sometimes it starts with coffee and ends with change. That night, Marcus came by with takeout. They ate in silence, the television muted. When a meal was done, Evelyn looked at him and said softly, "Your father would have been proud." Marcus met her eyes, something fierce but gentle behind them. "I'm not done yet, Mom." She nodded understanding. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, faint, rhythmic, fading into the night. Inside, mother and son sat in the warm glow of their kitchen, 2 quiet soldiers preparing for a battle not of fists, but of truth. And somewhere in the city, Sergeant Turner still believed he'd walk away untouched, never realizing the same woman he'd humiliated had raised a man about to dismantle his entire facade. Night had settled heavy over Marietta, thick with the kind of tension that precedes a storm. Marcus Brooks barely slept anymore. His dining table had become a command center, papers spread in neat, methodical piles, laptop screens glowing with evidence most people weren't meant to see. On one monitor, a timeline of complaints against Sergeant Blake Turner. On another, email chains showing how they'd been buried under bureaucracy. He wasn't just building a case. He was building a reckoning. Each click of his keyboard was a heartbeat. Each document, another piece of armor. He had learned to move quietly in a system that wasn't built for him, and now he used that quiet to his advantage. The Bureau didn't know he was working late for something personal. But this wasn't about vengeance. It was about restoring the dignity someone tried to steal from his mother. The next morning, Turner woke to flashing cameras outside his home. Reporters shouted questions, the words viral video, FBI investigation, civil rights probe, ricocheting through the humid Georgia air. His confident swagger had faltered. The department's internal affairs unit had been forced to open an inquiry under pressure from the public. Still, Turner smirked his way through a brief statement. "I've served this community for 20 years, he said, sweat gathering at his temple. "I didn't mean any harm. People twist things online." Inside her small living room, Evelyn watched the news broadcast. She could almost smell the arrogance through the screen. But she didn't smile. She didn't cheer. Justice wasn't joy for her. It was exhaustion, a long sigh finally released after years of holding it in. That week, the FBI officially joined the investigation, citing civil rights violations of interest. Marcus had to keep his role discreet. Conflict of interest rules were strict, but through quiet channels, his work reached the right desks. Files he'd prepared anonymously began circulating. Complaint records, audio clips, internal emails. Turner's empire of impunity started to crumble, not from outside attack, but from the inside out. Evelyn hadn't wanted the spotlight, yet it kept chasing her. The mayor's office called, asking if she'd speak at a community forum. Her first instinct was no. But when she looked at her son's tired face, his eyes carrying both fury and fatigue, she said, maybe it's time they hear a different kind of voice. The night of the forum, the town hall overflowed. TV cameras lined the back walls. Reporters whispered her name like she was part of history. Evelyn stood at the podium in a plain blue dress. No makeup, her hands trembling only slightly. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Her voice came steady and warm. "Respect," she began, "shouldn't depend on color. Dignity isn't something you earn. It's something you deserve." A hush filled the room. "When someone in uniform forgets that," she continued, "it's not just one person's mistake. It's the failure of a whole system that stayed silent too long." Applause rose like a wave. Her words spread across social media that night. Millions viewing the clip with a kind of reverence rarely given to the humble. Meanwhile, Turner's life unraveled. His phone stopped ringing. His friends at the precinct avoided him. Anonymous messages leaked his history to the press. "Pattern of misconduct," headlines said. "Cover up within Marietta PD." Late one evening, Turner waited near the parking lot outside the precinct, jaw clenched, heart burning with resentment. When Marcus walked out, briefcase in hand, Turner stepped from the shadows. "You think you're better than me, boy?" he hissed. The words slithered out, soaked in bitterness. "You'll never be one of us." Marcus didn't even blink. "Good," he said quietly. "I don't want to be." For a heartbeat, the world was still. Then Marcus walked away, leaving Turner standing in the dark, swallowed by the silence he used to command. Days later, the investigation's findings hit the public like a hammer. The FBI report detailed years of complaints, corroborated by new evidence and witness statements. Internal memos showed how Turner's superiors had repeatedly dismissed claims of racial discrimination. The press tore through the details, each page a revelation. Turner was suspended without pay pending termination. His face flooded the news again, but this time, his name carried shame instead of power. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the afternoon light soft around her, watching the live report. Turner's lawyer stammered through excuses. A reporter outside the courthouse said, "Public outcry continues as Sergeant Blake Turner faces disciplinary action following a viral incident involving local resident Evelyn Brooks, mother of FBI agent Marcus Brooks." Evelyn closed her eyes. She hadn't told anyone who her son was, but the world had connected the dots. That evening, Turner showed up at her doorstep. He looked smaller somehow, the arrogance drained from him. He tried to smile. "Ma'am," he began, "I wanted to apologize. I didn't know who you were." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, the silence heavy between them. Then, softly, "That's the problem. You never cared who I was until it cost you something." Turner's throat tightened. She didn't raise her voice or point a finger. Her calm was more powerful than any rage could have been. He turned away, unable to meet her gaze. The next morning, local headlines declared, "Officer suspended amid public fury." The man who once humiliated her in front of strangers now hid from the very public he claimed to serve. The scales hadn't just tipped, they had turned completely. Evelyn didn't celebrate. She simply opened her window, let the fresh air in, and whispered to herself, "That's enough." Across town, Marcus stood at his office window, watching dawn spill over Atlanta. He finally allowed himself a breath that felt like freedom. His mother had given him life, values, and restraint. Now she'd given him something else, proof that quiet strength could shake the world louder than any shout ever could. The sun over Marietta burned hotter than usual that morning, as if the whole town was sitting under a spotlight. Reporters packed the courthouse steps, their microphones pointed like spears, waiting for blood. Inside, the disciplinary hearing had begun, the one that would decide Sergeant Blake Turner's fate. The same man who once smirked over spilled coffee now sat in a pressed gray suit, jaw tight, pretending to be calm. Evelyn Brooks arrived quietly, wearing a white blouse and long skirt. She hadn't planned to attend, but something inside her said she needed to see this through. Cameras swiveled when she walked in. Some people whispered her name, others just stared, aware that they were looking at the woman who had sparked a reckoning. Marcus sat near the back of the room in his federal badge and neutral expression, though every muscle in his jaw was locked. He wasn't there as an FBI agent. He was there as a son. Turner's lawyer spoke first, painting him as a dedicated officer who made a minor mistake under stress. He used words like misunderstanding and context, but every sentence only made the silence in the room heavier. The panel of reviewers, half of them black, all of them weary, had heard it all before. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She stood slowly, hands clasped in front of her. For a moment, her voice didn't come. Then, softly, she said, "I came here today not because I want revenge. I came because I want truth." Her eyes found Turner's. "That morning, I wasn't threat. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. And when you poured that coffee on me, you didn't just humiliate me. You reminded me of every time this world told me I was less than human." The air in the room went still. Turner shifted in his seat, but she continued. "You didn't know me. You didn't have to. You saw my skin, and that was enough. But the truth is, you never know who someone is. You don't know what battles they've fought to stand where they stand." A murmur ran through the audience. Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked. But Evelyn wasn't performing. She was reclaiming something. Not just her voice, but her place in a world that tried to silence her. When the hearing adjourned, Turner left the courthouse through a side door, surrounded by flashing lights and shouts from protesters. "Justice for Evelyn," they chanted. No more silence. For the first time in his career, he couldn't hide behind his badge. His name trended nationwide, paired with phrases like abuse of power and racial bias. Even fellow officers distanced themselves, unwilling to be tainted by his fall. The department released a statement later that evening. "Sergeant Blake Turner has been terminated effective immediately following a sustained finding of misconduct and violation of departmental ethics." Marcus read the line over and over. It wasn't just words, it was history bending, even if slightly, toward accountability. But Evelyn didn't celebrate. That night, she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, listening to the quiet hum of her neighborhood. Neighbors walked by, some stopping to offer hugs, others simply nodding in solidarity. One young woman, a college student who had watched the video, approached her and said, "Ms. Brooks, you made me believe that speaking up matters." Evelyn smiled gently. "It always matters," she said, "even when your voice shakes." Across town, Turner sat alone in his dark living room, surrounded by boxes and silence. The walls that once displayed commendations and photos of him shaking hands with city leaders were bare now. His phone buzzed occasionally, mostly reporters or lawyers. He didn't answer. He poured himself a drink, stared into it. And for the first time, he saw himself not as the victim, but as the villain. Days turned into weeks. The city began small reforms. A new oversight board was formed, community leaders invited to meetings they were once excluded from. Evelyn was offered a role on the advisory council. She declined at first, saying she didn't have the energy for politics. But Marcus persuaded her. "Mom, you already started something. Maybe it's time you help shape what comes next." So she joined, quietly, humbly, the same way she lived. But her presence changed everything. Meetings that once dismissed voices like hers now paused when she spoke. She didn't use anger. She used truth, and it cut deeper than any argument. One evening, months after the incident, a young black rookie officer approached her after a meeting. "Ma'am," he said shyly, "I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, our training looks different now. We actually talk about what respect means." Evelyn smiled, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You just remember that badge means service, not superiority." The city healed slowly, imperfectly, but something undeniable had shifted. People were paying attention. Marcus knew his mother didn't need awards or attention, but when she was invited to speak at a state-level civil rights conference, he encouraged her to go. "You've earned this stage," he told her. At the event, Evelyn stood before a crowd of activists, lawmakers, and students. She spoke not about anger, but about empathy, about what happens when humanity gets lost behind power. Her words echoed through the auditorium. The real measure of justice isn't how we punish the guilty, but how we protect the innocent. When she finished, the audience rose in applause that didn't fade for nearly a minute. Cameras flashed, but Evelyn's eyes found one face in the crowd. Marcus, standing with pride and tears he didn't bother to hide. In that moment, she finally understood. What started as humiliation had become transformation. Not just for her son, for her community, for anyone who ever had to bow their head when they didn't deserve to. The morning light crept gently across Evelyn's living room floor, brushing against the framed photo of her late husband and the folded newspaper that read, "Evelyn Brooks, the woman who changed Marietta." She didn't feel like a hero. Heroes were loud, bold, invincible. She was just a mother who wanted to live in peace. Yet somehow, that simple wish had rewritten the story of an entire city. Outside, the air smelled different now. Less heavy, more open. Neighbors greeted each other more sincerely. Local businesses that once ignored her presence now waved her in by name. Change, she realized, doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives quietly, like sunrise after a long, black night. Marcus stopped by that morning, carrying a bag of groceries and a grin that carried both pride and relief. "You're trending again," he teased gently. "Someone online called you America's moral compass." Evelyn laughed softly. "Lord, I'm just a woman who wanted her coffee in peace." But Marcus knew better. What she had done was bigger than the coffee. She'd cracked open a conversation the town had avoided for decades, about dignity, power, and the faces people pretend not to see. He placed a small envelope on the table. "This came for you." Evelyn opened it slowly. Inside was an official letter with the gold seal of the Department of Justice. It was an invitation, the Civil Rights Recognition Award Ceremony, Washington, D.C. She blinked at the words, unable to speak for a long moment. "They want to honor me?" Marcus nodded, for reminding the nation that quiet courage is still power. Weeks later, Evelyn found herself standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial, a simple black dress flowing in the breeze, her heart full of disbelief. Crowds gathered, reporters waited, and dignitaries whispered her name. She looked up at the statue, the carved words above his head. "With malice toward none, with charity for all." When she stepped up to the podium, her speech wasn't written on paper. It was written in her memory, in her pain, in her healing. "I never asked for attention," she began softly, "but maybe attention is what it takes for people to finally see." She paused, scanning the faces before her, black, white, young, old. "The day that man poured coffee on me, I could have shouted. I could have cursed him. But instead, I went home and prayed. Not for his punishment, but for his understanding. Because hate is heavy, and I've carried enough in my life. I wanted to put it down." The crowd went silent. You could almost hear hearts breaking open. I didn't raise my son to hate. I raised him to build. And when he saw what happened, he didn't just see his mother humiliated. He saw injustice. And instead of violence, he used the tools of truth. He reminded me that justice isn't loud, it's steady. As she spoke, Marcus stood at the edge of the stage, his eyes wet. He had spent years learning the language of justice through bureaucracy and law. But his mother, she spoke it through humanity. When the applause came, it wasn't just sound. It was thunder rolling through generations. Evelyn stepped back from the microphone, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She didn't bow or wave. She just pressed her hands together, whispered thank you, and looked to the sky. That evening, back in her hotel room, she turned on the TV. Every major network was playing her speech. Across the bottom of the screen, from humiliation to honor, the story of Evelyn Brooks. She turned the volume down, smiling softly. Somewhere out there, young black girls were watching her, realizing that silence could be broken, not by shouting but by standing tall. Meanwhile, back in Marietta, life was different. The police department, once untouchable, had new leadership, more diverse, more accountable. The community meetings Evelyn had helped start continued monthly. Her name was etched onto a small plaque outside City Hall, in honor of Evelyn Brooks, for reminding us all that respect is not a privilege, it's a right. As for Blake Turner, his name had vanished from public memory as quickly as his power had. He moved out of town, living quietly somewhere upstate. No one knew much, and Evelyn didn't ask. She didn't wish him harm. She only hoped he found a kind of self-reflection that doesn't come easy. One evening months later, as she walked through a park near her home, she saw a group of young officers playing basketball with neighborhood kids. The scene was ordinary, but something about it made her chest swell. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not perfection, but progress. Marcus joined her on the bench, handing her coffee. Hot. No sugar, just how you like it. Evelyn smiled, taking the cup with gentle amusement. You remembered. I remember everything, he said quietly. Especially the day everything changed. Evelyn looked out at the sunset, streaking across the Georgia sky. It didn't just change, she said. It woke people up. They sat there in silence, mother and son, the world moving around them but not rushing them. The past no longer hurt as sharply. The scar was still there, but it had become a map, proof of where they'd been and how far they'd come. When the streetlights flickered on, Marcus stood and offered her his arm. Come on, Mom. Let's go home. She took it, smiling as she rose. Home sounds nice. As they walked back through the park, her voice drifted softly through the warm evening air. You know, Marcus, I think God really does have a way of turning pain into purpose. He looked at her with quiet admiration. You didn't just raise me, Mom, he said. You raised a whole generation watching you. And as the two of them disappeared into the glow of the streetlights, the world around them felt lighter, like a story that had finally found its ending. Not perfect, not painless, but right. And that was the story of a woman who turned humiliation into history, of a mother who taught a nation that silence can still roar. Thank you for watching, and if this story moved you, don't just scroll past it. Hit subscribe and join us as we uncover the real stories that expose power, reveal truth, and remind the world what justice looks like. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in Evelyn's shoes that day, would you have stayed silent or fought back? Drop your thoughts below, because every comment, every voice is part of the change.